2019. Bill and act may be hereby appropriation and allocation for the expenditure of the state government, general funds, and other funds, and changing certain provisions of the laws necessary to the proper operation of the state government for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2016 and June 30th, 2017. Making motion is acceptance of the majority ought to pass as amended in court. Chair recognizes Representative from Gloucester, Representative Esplin. Representative from Gloucester, Representative Esplin, request roll call. The chair of the roll call is expressed desire of the president. All those desiring roll call will signify in the usual manner. Sufficient number of request roll call. The roll call is in order. Making motion shall not accept. Majority ought to pass as amended in court. Now there's a question. Chair will vote. Sergeant Ross, Secretary of the Chamber. Call absentees. Call absentees. There's still two members in the seat who have not yet voted. No one member in the seat who has not yet voted. All now voted. Chair closed vote. For the show, Chair will have vote 120 voting affirmative, 47 negative. Motion prevails. First reading of the bill. House. Vote for read video A.
Mr. Speaker, I present House Amendment B with a filing number of H-448 to Committee Amendment A. Move its adoption and wish to speak to my motion.
House Amendment B, filing number H-448 to Committee Amendment A. Move its adoption. Fourth reading. House Amendment B. House Amendment B is on
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, men and women of the House. I rise today to speak about the amendment that's before you, attached to the budget. here to say a budget is really a compromise. I think one thing that's clear is it's a true compromise in the work that was done by the Appropriations Committee to build the foundation for what we have today. I'm offering this amendment recognizing the work, legislative leadership, building on that work of appropriations, that bipartisan work. There was a lot of give, there was a lot of take. There's some benefits for both sides here. There's something in it for everybody. Everyone has had to be flexible, and that's for sure, Mr. Speaker. It's been a true compromise. It's been an example of how divided government can actually work. I'd like to talk about some of the highlights in this amendment. Some of the things that are in this budget for our caucus. It's a win in the area of property taxes. We all know that property taxes are one of the most aggressive or regressive taxes out there. It hits a lot of young families, it hits seniors around the state, and it is brutal for those of us in rural Maine. We need to do what we can to help families to establish and build a life in Maine. We need to honor our elders around the state. We need to make sure that they can age in place, and I know you know that, Mr. Speaker. That's why this budget doubles the homestead exemption for all families. So the exemption will go from $10,000 to $20,000. It protects revenue sharing, which we've heard time and time again is so vital. Keeping it at the current level at $62.5 million. We know this funds local communities and is so important to people around the state of Maine. This will keep property taxes in check. It'll help pay for vital services like schools, police, firefighting, snow plowing, and so many more. This budget is really about also recognizing our future. It recognizes, it targets, it makes smart investments that strengthen our economy, and it's essential to our prosperity. Mr. Speaker, I think of our children when I think about the investments that we are making in our children, our students, and our workforce. This budget puts money into Head Start, invests in K through 12 education. It puts an additional $80 million in K through 12 education. It has funds in here for public universities, our community college systems, which everyone in this House knows how much I care about. As we move this forward, it puts more funding into job training so that Maine workers can stay competitive. I know everyone in the House agrees with that piece. Before my caucus, I say, last but not least, this budget is a budget that rejects trickle-down economics. Instead of huge tax breaks for the wealthy, it's a tax cut that targets low and middle-income families. These cuts won't blow a hole in future budgets as they are fully paid for. Rather than 50% of the tax break going to the top 10%, as we've seen proposed earlier in the session, this compromise sends 75% of the benefit to the bottom 90%. This is an income tax cut that's paid for of $140 million, Mr. Speaker. This compromise budget, based on some things that we heard, especially in our caucus, we received dozens of emails, some of us probably even close to hundreds. This compromise budget also protects the home mortgage deduction. We know how important it is and what a bedrock of our party's platform it is to make sure that we grow home ownership in the state of Maine and around the country. It also recognizes the importance of the Earned Income Tax Credit to help low-wage workers. It helps hardworking Mainers stay above the poverty line. This compromise budget makes the credit refundable for up to 5%. This compromise budget also protects Maine's most vulnerable. It helps seniors pay for their medication and health care and increases funding for nursing homes. It supports Mainers struggling with autism and mental illness. It reduces the wait list for services for individuals with intellectual disabilities. Mr. Speaker, this compromise budget also fixes the welfare cliff. It creates a system that alleviates the impact of the welfare cliff. We've heard so much about the welfare cliff, Mr. Speaker. We've put forward a proposal today that alleviates the welfare cliff. The sharp drop-off in benefits, it helps place people as recipients to work, and more, it helps their incomes increase. It's really a jobs initiative when you think about it, Mr. Speaker. There's a lot more in this budget, and I could go on, whether it's the additional drug agents, or whether it's the increase in the exemption for military pension, or whether it's the funding about the cold case squad. Because, Mr. Speaker, in the last two sessions, we've spent a lot of time talking about funding the cold case squad. It's an issue that's received bipartisan support, and it's about time we fund it. So I could go on and on, as many folks in this chamber have heard me go on and on in the past, but I won't. I just look forward that when we vote this today, this amendment that's before us receives a strong bipartisan vote, and I thank the men and women of the House, and I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank Republican leadership for their work on this compromise.
Madam President, the House Amendment A be adopted. The chair was there. Madam President, the House Amendment D be adopted. Vote. The chair recognizes Representative Hudson, Representative Shane. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Pro Tem. Men and women of the House. I present House Amendment A to Committee Amendment A with a body number of H439. Move its adoption and wish to speak to my motion. Representative Hudson, Representative Shane, presents House Amendment A with body number of H-439, Committee Amendment A, and moves its adoption to incorporate House Amendment A. Chair stands for Representative Hudson. Shane for the reading of House Amendment A. House. Vote. Chair recognizes Representative Hudson, Representative Shane. Thank you once again, Mr. Speaker. Men and women of the House, Duchesne is not Acadian French. It's not even St. John Valley French. The Duchesnes on my father's side, the Laplants on my mother's side, came down from somewhere around Montreal. They weren't Acadian fishermen. I'm pretty sure they were probably fur trappers. I still do not know how my grandfather Duchesne came to me to marry my grandmother, a woman who came here from Lithuania through Ellis Island when she was 9 years old. My wife's maiden name was McCrae. She's Scotch-Irish. She descended from some Irish brothers named Fitzhenry, who fled to Newfoundland as fugitives to the British, who, quite frankly, wanted to hang them. There's nothing like the threat of being hanged in greeting refugees. Well, with the exception of our bouncing brother here, Representative Bear, we all have similar stories. We are a nation of immigrants, a great melting pot. However, our immigrant forebears mostly have one thing in common. They came here legally. We are a kind, compassionate, generous people, but our generosity has limits. Our constituents are picking up the tab, and they have made it clear to me that they are against general assistance for people who are here unlawfully, what some would call illegal aliens. If you are here legally, looking to work legally and contribute to the Maine economy legally, we will help as best we can. These are tough times, and our generosity is constrained by our limited resources. This is a very tough budget, but we will do what we can. However, if you are here illegally, you are beyond the limits of our generosity. Try your luck. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, this amendment clarifies the eligibility definition of Title 22. It provides that the person who is unlawfully present and failing to follow a lawful process to apply for immigration status is not eligible for general assistance. Not now, not ever. This is a chance for all of us to go on the record and clearly oppose general assistance for illegal aliens by voting yes. So thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would request a roll call. Representative Hudson, Representative Shane, the roll call, the chair of roll call, so express desire, Mr. President, desire roll call, please signify. Any of your matters, Commissioner, request a roll call. A roll call is in order. Chair recognizes Representative Brown Lewiston, Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I will not be voting for this budget in its current form. To do so would be a betrayal of my principles. Voting to hurt men, women, and children here in Maine, seeking a new life, free of persecution, is unacceptable to me. Voting to deny a helping hand to people far less fortunate than I am, who came here hoping to find peace and freedom. Many seeking asylum from violence and praying for the opportunity to provide for themselves and their families, flies in the face of everything that I stand for. As a Marine, I took great pride in standing up for people that are not in a position to stand up for themselves. How could I do anything less as a legislator without portraying the values the Marines instilled in me? This budget does not take the necessary steps to ensure.
Representative Burr, Chair requires Representative Robert, Representative Bickford, provide this. May proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, without the addition of this amendment, this budget does not take the necessary steps to ensure that Maine societies are provided a roof over their heads and food to sustain them until they are able to obtain a work permit, get a job, and become successful, productive members of our communities that they so desire to be. I met Ms. in the State House today. Her name is Nima. She came to the United States from Djibouti. In Djibouti, America has a military installation that serves as a platform for operations to carry out the war on terror, a global conflict that I fought in. Nima is a strong young woman. She came here with her husband. They were the beneficiaries of general assistance for less than 1 year. Once their asylum request was adjudicated and her husband was given a work permit, he got a job at LLB and has been working there for more than 3 years. Nima works for a nonprofit organization helping others like our state fund self-care. She's working on her college degree, and she is pregnant with her child, who will be an American citizen. Failure to act to put into law the affirmative language necessary to continue to provide some small assistance to asylum, and by small I mean less than 1/10 of 1% of this budget, would mean that a woman like Nima, coming from a country where the U.S. has a military base used to support military operations, a country not as secure and not as free as America, failure to act means that a woman like Nima is not welcome in our state. This is the kind of vote that makes me question just what it is that I am doing in politics. If I won't stand up for the most vulnerable among us, then what am I prepared to fight for? An income tax cut getting 25% of the benefit to the wealthiest 10%. An income tax cut to the top 1%, representing 7,000 Mainers earning more than $370,000 a year, receiving a tax cut of $1,500 a year. Mr. Speaker, I say no. What would I do to protect Maine's vulnerable asylum seekers, to ensure that they receive the help they need to stand on their own and join in the enduring struggle to live the American dream? Mr. Speaker, a better question is what wouldn't I do?
Chair recognizes President McGuire, Representative Ray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I rise in support of the amendment before us, and I'm frankly ashamed that we are even having this public discussion about whether or not to assist the new Mainers in our state who need just a little help in order to get on the road to the American dream. Cloaked in the guise of welfare reform, even purposefully using incorrect terminology regarding immigration status, the Chief Executive's biennial budget proposed to cut new Mainers from accessing the most basic food and shelter. To me, this would be an appalling breach of what I consider to be basic humanitarian aid. Even worse, to pit the immediate and compelling needs of some vulnerable people against the real needs of other vulnerable populations fabricates false choices. We are not in a fiscal crisis. In fact, today we are passing tax cuts. With the actions of the Chief Executive, a murky court ruling, and difficult budget compromises, today the fate of hundreds of new Mainers in the cities of Portland, Lewiston, Bangor, and Westbrook, who are here legally, hangs in the balance with our votes. The way we treat our most vulnerable speaks to our core values as Maine people, as Americans. How we treat the stranger in our midst is a tenet of all ancient religions, including my own. In fact, my daily reading for today, June the 16th, is from the book of Leviticus, and I quote, "When an alien resides in your land, do not mistreat such a one. You shall treat the alien who resides with you no differently than the natives born among you. You shall love the alien as yourself, for you too were once aliens in the land of Egypt. I, the Lord, am your God." End quote. Listening hour after hour in appropriations to the testimony against the Chief Executive's proposals to cut general assistance for new Mainers, I couldn't help but think of the famous words inscribed on our Statue of Liberty. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. We are the country of immigrants, the great melting pot, and this has always been our strength. Sadly, sometimes our better angels do not govern us. Historically, nearly every immigrant group has faced resistance on their arrival. But when we shut the door behind us, when we give in to bigotry and narrow-mindedness, those words of welcome in New York make us hypocrites. We are better than this. I urge you to follow my light, and I am grateful for this opportunity to speak.
Chair, Madam President, Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House. When my grandfather arrived on these shores, he saw those words on the Statue of Liberty, and they meant a great deal to him. When he was fleeing the pogroms of the Cossacks and the Tsars of Russia, who just wouldn't kill him because of his religion, or should they decide not to kill him, to conscript him into the army once again for a 7-year term as that nation went to war yet again in a foolish way. But he did make it to New York and brought his family over subsequently. And if he hadn't, his family would have been wiped out, very holocaust. So those words mean a lot to me, as I'm sure they mean much to all of us. And they mean a lot to the people for whom this amendment means so much. The people that were out in the hallway as we walked into the chamber this morning. I hope you had a chance to exchange a few words with these people. They are people. They are not blank faces. They are not numbers. I asked as many of them as I could, what's your name, where do you come from, what did you do in your own country? Every single one of the people that I spoke to, and I spoke to at least a dozen, was somebody that we could be so proud of. They were engineers, they were software designers, social workers, professors. These are the very kind of people that Maine needs. These are the people with the energy and the motivation and the willpower to make the most out of their lives and to share it with their family and their community. How can we turn our backs on them? They are the best that the world has to offer. I know these people also because I did some work as a lawyer, well, not in court, but doing some advising through the Immigrant Legal Advocacy Program. This is an organization I led that gives advice to people who are seeking asylum. I ask you, Mr. Speaker, if you know the difference between a lawful refugee and an asylum seeker. Most people don't. The only difference is where that person has filed their application. If they filed it in Africa, for example, they are, and it is granted, they are a refugee. If they do it here, they are an asylum seeker. The requirements, the criteria are exactly the same, and they are tough. You have to be under a definitive threat of death or harm because of your race, because of your tribal association, because of your religion, because of your political beliefs. These people have nowhere else
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, men and women of the House. I've been here before biennial budgets. They've all been different. I've been told by people way more experienced than I have that the state budget is a lot like a sausage. Most of us don't really know very much about what goes into it. Very few of us have a study for making it, but almost all of us have an opinion about how it tastes and how it could taste better. I know a whole lot has been thrown into this budget that I really don't like, and not that much that I do like. I know it's too early to know how it's going to taste, but I'm very worried about bad heartburn. But right now, Mr. Speaker, I need to tell you how I feel about something that just can't wait. There are several thousand new Mainers in our state, or in this country legally, who want very much to become contributing members of our communities and citizens of our state. They are women and men, mothers, fathers, and children. They are multilingual, educated, hardworking. Where they came from, they were teachers, doctors, home care workers, engineers, lawyers, social workers, backyard gardeners, bankers, nutritionists, office workers, cab drivers, and shop owners. But they can't work for money here now because they're seeking asylum, and they cannot work and may not work without permission papers. So while they wait, they volunteer, making positive contributions to their new community. And when they're not doing that, they're going to school to learn English and more about our culture. Maine is their new home. Up until now, I've been extremely proud of how we've welcomed and provided basic needs to these new Mainers. I'm certainly enjoying the richness that cultural diversity is bringing to my city, and I think we should all be looking forward to the enthusiasm, experience, work ethic, and skills that these folks will shortly be bringing to our state workforce. In Portland, there are 1,000 legal immigrants waiting for permission to work. There are hundreds more in Westbrook and Lewiston and Bangor, and smaller numbers scattered throughout the state. And Mr. Speaker, now I'm worried. These days, the vast majority of general assistance is spent on housing. That means eliminating GA for asylum seekers in Portland could immediately put 1,000 legal immigrants, men, women, and children, out on the streets. 1,000 people. That must be the equivalent of a devastating fire leaving a whole neighborhood in many towns full of homeless people. Or in some cases, 1,000 people would be a whole town homeless. Without the continuing availability of general assistance for all legal immigrants, this budget simply will not work for me or for Maine. It's inedible sausage, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to close, Mr. Speaker. Last night when I got home, I had an email from a constituent that's pretty direct. It says, "Do not betray the democratic ideals you were elected to uphold by voting for a budget that forces people out of their homes. The outcomes of this action will define the way I vote during the next election cycle. Virtually all my friends and acquaintances feel exactly the same way. Good luck to you and to those families whose fates rest in your hands." Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair, thanks, Representative from South Burrows, Representative Beavers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, I just want to quote one verse or one chapter of the New Testament. Matthew 25, verse 40. "Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto me." Thank you.
Chair, thanks, Representative Westbrook, Representative Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, women in the House. I want to thank my good friend, Representative Hudson, for bringing this motion. It is incredibly important. And the only thing I'm going to add to this that hasn't been said yet is that we need to understand that the only way to preserve general assistance for asylum seekers and for other people lawfully present is to get this language in the budget. I think it's important for people to understand that this is already paid for in the budget, in the report that many of us voted on just a few minutes ago. When we moved that budget, we voted for the money that would pay to continue GA for the people seeking general assistance. But what happened was, the recent court decision that many of us are aware of made it clear that we also need the language that Representative Hudson has put forward in the budget to protect the temporary support for asylum seekers who are waiting for permission to work. These people want to work, they have skills, but because of the limbo that they're in as they're waiting for their applications, they are working. They can't work. This amendment simply provides the necessary language we need in order to provide this support. And Mr. Speaker, as I've thought about this matter over the last few months, and I've thought about it a lot over the past few months, obviously my concern and my worry is for the people that my friend the representative from Portland just mentioned. You know, there's well over 1,000 people, not just in my community, but throughout the state, who really, really need this help in order to prevent homelessness and keep them out of, or help them combat the devastating poverty that they live in now. But you know, every time I think about this, ultimately, there are other thoughts that come into my head, Mr. Speaker. Every time I think about this, I think about my ancestors, my people, who came over here over a century ago. And I remember being a kid and sitting at my grandparents' kitchen table and listening to their stories. And my people, like the ancestors of many of you, I'm sure, came to America because they were fleeing. Fleeing oppression, fleeing civil war, fleeing famine, fleeing poverty. They were in flight. They came to America fleeing those things. And when they got here, it wasn't easy for them either. It was hard. But they embraced America. And America, sometimes with hesitation, embraced them back. And they became interwoven into the fabric of this country. And my immigrant ancestors built this country. And that makes me proud. They worked, and they labored, and they swept, and they swung hammers, and they drove tractors, and they built roads, and they taught school, and they took care of the sick. And when the time came, they went off to war to the very places where they had come from, and put their lives on the line to protect the freedom that they found here. And the people that we are trying to help here today are the same. They are exactly the same. There is no difference between today's immigrants and my people, my ancestors who came here. And they are the key to the future of this state and of this nation. In my community, the children of immigrant families sat side by side in school with my kids. And that makes sense, because their future and the future of my children are intertwined and they cannot be separated. And the continued greatness of America and the future prosperity of Maine will depend on the achievement of all those children. My children, your children, all the children of Maine, no matter where they were born or where their parents were born. And Mr. Speaker, we cannot turn our backs on people who so desperately need a little temporary support to survive. And let's be honest, what they need does not cost a lot. And as I said, it's already in the budget. But at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, when push comes to shove, it isn't about the money. At the end of the day, we cannot turn our backs on these people who so desperately need our help. Because we can't dishonor our own people, our ancestors who struggled and worked and fought to make sure that we could be here and stand here today. And I cannot dishonor them by turning my back on people who are just like they were. The people we're trying to help here are just like us. They are just like us. And if we turn away from them, we are turning away from ourselves and turning away from all the people who brought us here. Mr. Speaker, the generations that came before us are watching what we do here today. Today's generation is depending on what we do here today. The generations of the future will judge us based on what we do here today. And I hope we can make them all proud and support the people who need our help. Thank you.
Chair, can I report our to the Farnsburg?
Jimmy Carter, our former president. Please support. Amen.
Chair recognizes Representative Portland to Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members of the House. On the afternoon of October 9, 2012, a young Pakistani girl boarded her school bus on the northwest Pakistani district of Swat. A gunman asked her by name. He then pointed a pistol at her and he fired 3 shots. One bullet hit the left side of her forehead, traveled under her skin to the length of her face, and then went into her shoulder. That same little girl managed to survive. She is currently receiving asylum in Great Britain. In December of last year, she won the Nobel Peace Prize for standing up for women and girls, for having a right to education. Her name was Malala. And I wonder what we would do today if Malala was one of the girls who were seeking asylum in our state. I wonder what we would do today if we were able to open our doors to 200 Nigerian girls who were kidnapped from school and taken. We won't know because we haven't found them. 216 girls remain missing. We all know these stories because they're on the front pages. We don't always know the stories that are in our backyard. When I talk to people, I've met former U.S. senators, not U.S. senators, senators from their country, living here in Maine. You never know it. People are here because they've been persecuted. When rape is a strategy in your country for oppression, when violence is an everyday way of life, there are no choices. I hope today that we will call upon our better angels and think about the faces that we do know. And think about what it would be like and what we would say to that person if they were in front of us. When I was in Morocco last fall, I spoke to a woman who is an Afghanistan member of parliament. And one of her colleagues happened to be markedly wealthy, and so she was able to have a limousine that was capable of withstanding an IED, and it's a good thing. Because an IED hit her car. Everyone outside of the car died that day. But she was alive. She was alive, but she was hit because she had the audacity to be a woman and serving in government. There are no protocols to protect members of parliament for security purposes. We are talking about freedom fighters. We are talking about people who stood up in their countries for civil rights. We're talking about people who are standing up for the rights of women, the rights of girls to be educated. We should be honored to be bringing people of this caliber, intellect, educational capacity, and courage. Courage. What an amazing word. It gets over years. That's who we're talking about. Sometimes the courage is packing a bag and grabbing your kids and getting in a car and going someplace, any place that does not end up in your children being dead. It doesn't mean that you cannot be a hero because you're a taxi cab driver. It just means that you're standing up for your family. We don't have to know what courage looks like here. We don't ever have to know. We're never, as a politician, I am never going to have the problem of having to buy a limousine that can withstand a bomb simply because I have the audacity to show up to work and stand up for the people that I believe in. But we have politicians in this state who came here because if they did not, they would be dead because they stood up for their people. There is a lot of honor in the people that were in the hallways today. There is a lot of honor throughout the state and our folks who are seeking asylum. Sanctuary, really. We're seeking sanctuary because they have the audacity to express what we continue to hold for granted, which is the First Amendment right to free speech. What would you do if it was your daughter? What would you do if your daughter got on a bus? You would have the audacity to write a blog that said that girls should be educated. Would you hold your hat out and ask for help if it meant that your daughter had an opportunity for a future? What about if it was your son that might get kidnapped and taken into a military rebel group? What would you do? We're talking about the extremest of circumstances for people. I, for one, would be honored if Malala chose to move to Maine. But I don't have to be because I'm already honored by the immigrants who have come here, hoping for a better life, following the torch of the Statue of Liberty. My family came to this country in the 1600s, on both sides of my family. I am no less an immigrant than they were. My family came, just like many of the folks in this room, fleeing religious persecution. I've never mentioned this before because it's not something that I think is really helpful, but there is a governor in my ancestry of the state of Maine. That governor has the distinction of having removed folks from Malaga Island. That is not an honor that my family wants to live up to. We have an opportunity to change that, to show the world, really, that we value life, that we respect courage. First and foremost, that we love our neighbor as ourselves. I urge you to vote in support of the pending motion. And if you vote against it, I hope I get a whole bunch of notes explaining to us how we're going to see 900 people on the streets of Portland in 2 weeks' time. Explain to us how that's going to work. I want to see notes from people who have camps, who are willing to open those camps up for folks so that they have a home this summer. If you can't do that, I would ask you to support the pending motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair, can I ask Representative Winter or Representative Bateman?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, women in the House, I rise for it. Every person in this chamber, I believe, proud of them. Our ancestors come from different places, practice different ways, sometimes eat in different fields. But we share one nation and one set of ideals Still, I love America more than any other country on earth, and I wish to be nowhere else. It has already been quoted, but I'm going to say it again. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe freedom. The wretched refuge of your teeming shores. Then leave the homeless tempest tossed to me. I lift my neck beside the golden door. I am certain, Mr. Speaker, that every person here, anyone listening or watching knows that those closing lines from King Lazarus' 1883 sonnet entitled "The New Colossus" are emblazoned on a bronze plaque on the pedestal of the Statue of Liberty, placed there in 1903. We are a nation of immigrants that are settled today. As Thomas Jefferson challenges us, quote, "Shall we refuse the unhappy fugitives from distress that hospitality which the savages of the wilderness extended to our fathers arriving in this land? Shall oppressed humanity find no asylum on this globe?" We are a nation of immigrants. Let us be reminded by the international community through the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, for which this country voted, that, quote, "Everyone has the right to seek and to enjoy in other countries asylum from persecution," end quote. We are a nation of immigrants, let us never forget. Throughout this long and painful conversation, we have heard arguments that we can't afford to take care of our own. We can't even help our own disadvantaged, our elderly, and our infirm. So how can we help those people? I say, well, why not? Why can't we? From the long perspective of human history, from before the times of the pharaohs to now, in the wealthiest nation ever to exist on earth, can we really claim poverty in good faith? Throughout this conversation, Mr. Speaker, we have heard fears that sound like this. They don't look like us. They don't speak our language. They worship a different God than we do. They have strange ways. They cannot be trusted. They have come here to take from us, to pick our pockets, to live off the dole. Is that so? If we haven't walked in their shoes, then how can we know? Who are we to judge them? Mr. Speaker, we're in the middle of the house, and we've forgotten what makes us human. Have we forgotten what makes us humane? Have we forgotten the purpose of this government? Our purpose for existing, for being here, the principles that guide our work in this chamber are laid out in our state's constitution. We have formed the government of the state of Maine, quote, "to establish justice, ensure tranquility, promote our common welfare, and secure to ourselves and our posterity the blessings of liberty," end quote. Is not the welfare of all God's children our common welfare? Is it treating all of our residents with fairness, equality, and indeed justice? Is it our responsibility to truly secure the blessings of liberty for those who have sought refuge among us, fleeing tyranny and civil war? It breaks my heart that we have this today, Mr. Speaker. I will quote a passage from The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. Quote, "Life is tragic simply because the earth turns and the sun inexorably rises and sets. And one day, for each of us, the sun will go down for the last time. Perhaps the whole root of our trouble, the human trouble, is that we will sacrifice all the beauty of our lives, will imprison ourselves in totems, taboos, crosses, blood sacrifices, steeples, mosques, races, armies, flags, and nations, in order to deny the fact of death, the only fact we have. It seems to me that one ought to rejoice in the fact of death, ought to decide, indeed, to earn one's death by confronting with passion the conundrum of life," end quote. And so, in facing the conundrum of life in this conversation, I am going to flip the script. I am not going to call them immigrants or asylum seekers or legal non-citizens. I am going to call them exactly what they are, human beings, seeking a better life in the greatest country on earth. How can we, in good conscience, conscience votes to throw decent human beings out onto the streets because our sometimes cold and our sometimes insensitive language around, quote, welfare cheats and illegals, end quote, has been repeated so often we have lost our ability to see the human beings behind the labels. As Martin Luther King Jr. said, we must come to see that the end we seek is a society at peace with itself, a society that can live with its conscience. In order to live with my conscience, Mr. Speaker, I cannot, ought not, will not vote against human beings who need our help. I cannot, ought not, will not pit them against other human beings who also need our help. And I cannot, ought not, will not fear what happens at the ballot box in the next election. Mr. Speaker, women and men of the House, no matter the outcome of this conundrum, this amendment, this vote that we are about to take this afternoon, I pledge to work with anyone in this chamber on any side of the aisle to make sure that our state is more welcoming to young families, more welcoming to people who do not look like most of us, more welcoming to people from different lands and other countries, and yes, more welcoming to human beings fleeing the terrible places where life can be found, human beings whose toughness and resilience and ambition will make us a better state now and in the future. Brilliantly blessed are those who create unity out of vast diversity, for they will experience heaven on earth. Mr. Speaker, women and men of the House, let us remember who we are. Let us follow the golden lamp of Lady Liberty and vote to pass this amendment. Thank you.
A roll call is in order. If any questions, shall the House accept House Amendment A? House ready for question? All those in favor vote yes, all those opposed vote no. Chair vote. Start round. Chair the change.
Chris, can you come here a minute? Or can you peek over here a minute? I'm a little bit confused by something, and I want to make sure I'm getting it right in my story. So the Oshkosh's amended report on the budget was this, a roll call. Then Committee Amendment A, which is the majority report, was passed unanimously. But the Oshkosh as amended is A.
Yeah.
Oh, accepting it. Okay. So which one's the vote on the bill? Is it this one or this one?
It's going to be.
Right. Well, here's the question I need to figure out. Do I, in this early version of the story, do I say an initial vote the House of Representatives approve the spending bill unanimously, or move it 101-47?
We wouldn't even go there. What would you say? I just ignore that vote. It's not the winner.
Well, this is what's going online right now. It's just an early, tentative first steps. We'll just get something online.
Just call it procedural, and just I would have a sentence that says the final vote that matters is stipulated.
Yeah, I've got that. Budget basis for the vote. Well, I think it is important that the deal, the compromise deal, was passed under the hammer. Here. Yeah. No, it's House Amendment B. House Amendment B is like the deal that they
If we're
came
going
up
to get
with.
into it, I would ask. I think it's none of these early votes matter in terms of passage.
I get that they're not going to matter in the end, but in the early version of the story, if they're all I got, I kind of want to have at least one.
For the sake of showing the 2/3.
Yeah, basically.
I see where you're going with it, but damn, you gotta figure it out. I'm still figuring out how this works.
All right, please.
I present House Amendment D with a filing motion of H451, being amendment A, and move its adoption, and wish to speak my motion.
Representative Porter, second, House Amendment D, filing number H-451, being amendment A, and move adoption for reading. House Amendment D. Chair states first bill order of the second utility House Amendment D. House. Vote, Chair, and Representative Porter, Representative Second.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This being amendment in the House, I'd like to start by thanking my colleagues, our colleagues on the Appropriations and Financial Affairs Committee for the insufferable amount of time that they put in trying to get us to a place that seems very difficult to get to. I'd also like to thank the hardworking staff on the second and first floor at OSPR and the Revision's office for helping me pull together this amendment, which, Mr. Speaker, I will be very brief in presenting. What I've done, Mr. Speaker, is because of angst I have of things that have been left out of the budget, I've figured out a way to find a little money, and I'll tell you about that, and then I'll tell you about how I propose to spend it. I would impose a tax equalization process on the top 2% of wage earners so that it equals what the bottom 98% of us pay in taxes. And for the biennium in FY16, that would raise $180 million, and in fiscal 17, $205 million. That's tax equalization on the top 2% of wage of tax households, and giving us $385 new million for the budget. The other thing I did was went through the Maine State Housing Authority, looking to the housing opportunity for Maine Fund for $3 million in each year, and I'll tell you that I would spend that right away on housing options for the homeless, $3 million each year. The rest of the money I would propose as follows. In education, I would fully fund the essential programs and services, and I would replace the federal Title I money, which as it is now, supplants, inappropriately I would add, local funds. So I would replace supplement Title I money that would free, that goes into the formula so that the Title I money could be used as it is intended. And I would put money into the Maine State Grant Program. It would be $194 million for the essential programs and services, which would bring us to 150 or 155. They like that, isn't it? 55%. The Title I supplement, not supplant, it would be $90 million to biennium, and it would be $18 million to the Maine State Grant Program. I would add 6 Forest Ranger 2s to the agriculture budget, a consumer protection inspector, that's a milk protection inspector, and $76,000 for the food assistance program. In health and human services, in wages for the in-home and community support workers, that would be for the biennium $15 million. And then two of my favorites. I told you I wasn't going to go after what was in the budget proposal, and I'm not. But the changes to the inheritance tax I find particularly curious in a and age when people who are residents of nursing facilities and assisted living facilities who have gone through the Medicare spend down and have $2,000 in the bank and an $8,000 used car in the parking lot, and that's their total liquid asset. And they are given, after they give over their Medicare payments to the department, they are given a $10 a month allowance in a nursing facility and a $20 a month allowance in an assisted living home. And I go back 5, you're not going to have to pay the state tax now if you're a state. And it's hard to believe that this happens because financial advisors I think can usually help you circumnavigate this problem. But if your estate is now less than $5.5 million, you will be free from estate tax. And we can't give a little old lady in a nursing home $10 a month. That's pretty strange to me. I have money for Housing First, which is a program that would support services in a project, a housing project that would be targeted at folks who are mostly members of the consent decree. They have severe chronic mental illnesses. They're a homeless population now. The Housing First model has been demonstrated successfully before twice. One in a facility for men and another for women. Housing 30 individuals with services, and there's money to do another one. The capital funds are available. They're waiting for the service money, so I put $800,000 into the budget for that. There are 12 peer centers, which are the front end of the mental health community-based service system around the state. There are 12 of them. They haven't had an increase in their budget in 19 years. The budget that we're considering has found a little bit of money for them. A 10% increase for those 12 centers would be $147,000 a year. So I put in a little money to bring that up to fully fund that. And then going forward with that, another $24,000 in 16 and $48,000 in 17 to rebate the funding for those grants. There's $2 million a year for child care vouchers and quality programming assurances to support the resurrection of the early care and education system in the state, and supports for families who are in search of quality child care. There's $1.4 million each year in the budget for this amendment for Head Start to bring the Head Start allocation up to $2 million, new allocation up to $2 million. There's money to remove the Dell asset test and to restore the Quimby crossover payments to nursing facilities and to create critical access nursing facility funding. And that, when you get to the end, we spent $350 million out of the 391. So there is $33 million, give or take, to go to the Budget Stabilization Fund. And Mr. Speaker, thank you for your time, and I look forward to a robust support for this amendment. Thank you.
Chair, can I start with the report, Mr. Gage?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, I move that House Amendment D to Committee Amendment A be indefinitely postponed.
Instructions for free order of committee is moved to that postponement of House Amendment D. Chair has Representative Portman, Representative Stuckey.
Mr. Speaker, I request a roll call.
Representative Portman, Representative Stuckey, the roll call. Mr. Chair will roll call. Mr. President, Mr. President, all those design roll call, please signify in the manner. Sufficient number of requests for roll call. A roll call is in order. Chair has Representative Thompson, Representative Hadley. Chair is in favor. Any questions? Definitely postponement of House Amendment D. The House ready for the question. Chair votes are drawn to secure the chamber.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I present House Amendment C with a filing number of H449 to the Committee Amendment A. Move its adoption and wish to speak to my motion.
Representative Scavino, reading to House Amendment C, the filing number of H449, Committee Amendment A. Move its adoption. Clerk will read House Amendment C.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, men and women of the House. For a moment, I want folks to look at me not as the majority leader, but as a representative of the folks from Skowhegan and from Madison, the two communities that I represent folks in. I ask folks to look at me. I'll take my majority leader hat off for a moment. I also need to say that I truly respect those people in the caucus that asked me not to bring this forward today. Mr. Speaker, yourself included, asked me not to bring this issue forward to discuss today on the House floor. I bring this issue not to disrespect members of committees that have worked on this issue, members of education who work this issue, or the members on taxation who've reported a bill out that's in the pipeline where this amendment comes from. But, Mr. Speaker, I rise today sort of out of desperation. Desperation for those folks, my friends, my neighbors, the folks living in many towns around the state of Maine, the unbelievable mill towns of the past, the towns that are close to disappearing. And I bring this amendment forward And I think back to this morning, Mr. Speaker, when the good representative from Portland, Representative Farnsworth, rose in caucus and he said, what are we doing for the mill towns? What are we doing about what the good representative from Medway, Representative Stanley, raised last night at the caucus? It was at that point, Mr. Speaker, this morning that I decided I needed to go forward. I needed to bring this amendment forward. I needed to give an opportunity for the good representative from Medway to speak, for the good representative from Jay, Representative Gilbert, to speak and to talk about the heydays of that community, the heydays of that mill town. Mr. Speaker, I also had to give an opportunity for the good representative from Norridgewock to be able to stand up, Representative Farron, and to speak about his experience at the recent town meeting in Madison, where they voted to disband the police department. So many of us come from communities where that would be unheard of. I imagine people can't even fathom what that's like. Most of the time we go to town meeting, we discuss whether or not we're going to buy another police car, whether we're going to add a detective. I speak in broad terms as I say that because in our towns, we struggle. We struggle to keep police cars on the road. We struggle because we are one-horse towns. Mr. Speaker, you've heard me talk before about how proud I am of my town. I speak about New Balance. I speak about the Sappy Mill. But when the Sappy Mill came to our town and they said, we're cutting, we want a reappraisal, we don't want to pay as much in taxes. And the town was blindsided. Overnight, the value of that mill went down $100 million. And it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough, Mr. Speaker. They've come back, they want more. We will battle in court. We will spend probably $500,000 on court fees and appraisals just to lose more value in that mill, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I look up the river, I think of the folks in Madison. I think of all they've done to try to keep that mill there. The valuation of that mill was cut. They will no longer have a police department. Mr. Speaker, I went home the other night. My wife was writing the school budget for her classroom. I think she has $100 or $200 to spend. She'll spend more of her personal money out of her $38,000 salary than she will get for a budget for her school classroom. I really rise today out of desperation. I don't know what to do. I truly am conflicted, Mr. Speaker. I'd hoped that what's on the board, this amendment, would have made it in the budget, as you know, but it didn't. I'm here to offer this. I offer this not only for the folks in Skowhegan and Madison, but the folks in the rim counties, places that people visit, places that used to be productive. In many cases, they still are productive. But we are one-horse towns. Those mills can no longer pay 60 to 70% of our tax burden. I'm here today, Mr. Speaker, because I think this is an issue of fairness. We decided to, at some point in time, to save money, to tweak the way we value our towns. We decided to go with a 3-year average. We changed things in sudden and severe to save money. We made some of those adjustments, Mr. Speaker, to help our thriving communities, so that they could be on a 3-year average because they are doing better. But I say to you, men and women of the House, it's not working for communities that lose valuation overnight. They lose valuation because the valuation in their mills drops out from the bottom of them, Mr. Speaker. We have sat in this House chamber, we have debated free trade policies, and I am here, Mr. Speaker, as a representative of a community who sees and feels the burden of those trade policies, Mr. Speaker. So if men and women disagree with free trade, if they disagree with what's happened with the paper industry, with foreign subsidies being dumped on the market, Mr. Speaker, I encourage you to light up the board. Vote for this amendment. Not because I'm the majority leader or anything like that, Mr. Speaker, but because you value mill towns around the state of Maine. I don't rise today to try to derail the budget. I truly rise because I don't know what to do, Mr. Speaker. Myself, I put forward several bills. This is not a new issue. When you go downstairs, you look at the law library, this has happened in towns around the state of Maine. Usually it's not so complex. Usually a bill gets proposed, it's acted upon, it moves forward, it ends up not being a partisan issue, and we address the needs of those communities, Mr. Speaker. So I am rise today really thinking about the times in our caucus, Mr. Speaker, when the good representative from Medway stands up, Representative Stanley, he speaks, I listen. His stories, they resonate with me. I listen to those stories stay in my head, and most importantly, Mr. Speaker, those stories stay in my heart. So I hope when we light up the board today, this gets support, but I also realistically realize that this has other consequences. It could upset the budget process, Mr. Speaker. But my hope is today we send this down to the Senate with this amendment attached. We see how it does. We'll debate this later on this week as well. But I really rise out of desperation, and I ask for your help, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Representative Freeborn, Representative Biennial.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move House Amendment C to Committee Amendment A be indefinitely postponed.
Representative Freeborn, Representative Biennial, move that House Amendment C be indefinitely postponed. Chair recognizes Representative Scavino, Representative Gates.
Mr. Speaker, I request a roll call.
Scavino, Representative Gates, request a roll call. Chair, roll call. Mr. President, roll call, please signify in the usual manner. Chair is down. Official number 9, request a roll call is in order. Chair recognizes Representative Northwalk, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, I rise to you today as we face many difficult decisions. And I'm reminded that the reason I was sent here was to represent the citizens of District 111, which include Madison, Northwalk, and Seoul. I had the opportunity on June 8th to attend the Madison annual meeting. And I know we've had lots of discussions about carve-outs and backroom deals and everything else. And this is in the light of day that very similar to my colleague from Skowhegan, Representative Kay, but I'm reaching out to you to say I don't know what else to do as well. I watched the citizens of the town of Madison make difficult decisions on that night. In the last 2 years, their evaluation has their mill rate's gone up by $4.4 per thousand. They've had $500,000 out of their school administration budget. They've had $800,000 out of the municipal budget. And they just recently, on that Monday night, decided to turn their police department over to the Somerset County Sheriff's Department. So they're not looking for a handout. This body created part of this problem, and I don't know the exact date, but 2 or 3 years ago, when they did the 3-year evaluation. And what this legislation is doing, and I submit to each of you, it could happen in your hometown. Instead of doing the 3-year average, is to do the 1 year. And it could happen to any one of you if you have a large employer in your town. And we're looking to make that instead of the 3-year average for the 1 year. And the citizens of Madison look out and say, yeah, we know that we're asking for this specifically, but if you look at a lot of the other folks, it can happen in their hometown. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Representative Buckford, Representative Seeley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, men and women of the House. I'm wondering if this amendment will affect the reimbursement amount already calculated to the community center school funding formula. And if it does, can you give a breakdown on how this amendment affects our communities?
Representative, I move the question to the chair. Anyone who cares to answer? Chair recognizes Representative Virginia, Representative Gilbert.
Mr. Speaker, men and women of the House, I stand in support of the motion before us. Town valuation should be modified as quickly as possible to reflect valuations when they experience sudden and severe drops in valuation as a result of mill abatements. In particular, the school funding formula as applied to each community, including the town of Jay, should be modified to reflect that loss to revenue. Prior to 2013, the mill in Jay was valued at $941,345. As a result of an abatement received by First in 2014, the mill's value decreased to $607,206,244. A reduction in taxable property of $254,130,000. 27% of the mill's taxable value. The understanding mill represents 69% of the tax base for the town of Jay, with a population of a little over 4,000. This loss is a very significant one for the purposes of the school funding formula. It is no coincidence that each of the paper mill towns has suffered significant reductions in valuation. It is an unfortunate reality in the paper industry in this state. The impact is severe on each town's valuation and application of the school funding formula and its impact on our students. Let me conclude by urging that all of us do the right thing. The education of a child in Jay is no less nor more important than the education of a child in Kittery, Fort Kent, or anywhere in between. We want all our children to have an opportunity to learn and grow, but we need to allocate our limited resources in a fair way to provide everyone with a fair opportunity. House Amendment B does just that, and I urge you to support the amendment. I am asking, pleading for your support for Biennial towns throughout the state of Maine.
Chair recognizes Representative Medway, Representative Stanley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, I stand in front of you today on the highest speech I have ever made in this House. And why? Because I'm going to talk about us as Mainers. We care about other people. There's somebody in our community, came down with cancer, came down with something, we all go to town hall, we all chip in, we all help as much as we could. That is what's going on in these middle towns today. We have one name. Time for us to realize that. We're all in this together. So it's good with all the names, it's good peaceful names, it's good wonderful names, it's good for some names. It's good for everyone. We all fall. But when you have communities, whole town communities, that are going down the tube, I hate to say just the words going down the tube, because I know. I lived through Morlock, I lived through East Morlock, and I just recently seen what happened down London. And I'll tell you what, if you live in one of those communities, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't live there, it's pretty hard to visualize what's going on. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what's going on. So we got elderly people living in their homes on Social Security and working these mills all their life. And what happens is they become the taxpayer in these communities. Trying to run a school, trying to run a town, and then guess what? The bill rate goes up to $25, $30 a thousand. They're living on $1,600, $1,700 a month. I'll tell you what, that tax bill becomes very high. Very high. We sit here, we all want to go and go, talk to people, talk to the elderly. What do we do? We come out here and say, boy, I feel bad for these people. What's the good help? We need that. Give them opportunity to help. Start with the population of these communities and add them up. We have about 1,000 people. And I'll tell you what, I live in Maine. Why? Because of the quality of life that we have here. And quality of life that we provide to the people that come here. But I see what's going on in some of these middle towns. The quality of life is not what it used to be. The quality of life is deteriorating. And why is it deteriorating? It's because of what's going on because of the big drop in valuation that these different towns have. If you take $150 million, $200 million, $100 million on an evaluation of probably $300 million or $450 million, I'll tell you what, it's about a third of your budget. A third of the evaluation is gone. That being gone, I'll tell you what, who's left to pay? People and the residents in that community. Most of these people are retirees, because what's going on today, in a lot of these communities, people that are working in these factories are coming from passing through there, to expect all these little small towns and everyone. I live in Biennial, Maine. Let me tell you what's going on. Going on in Maine, about 450 homes, either in California or Biennial. He's going on down the road for 8 miles. And they're 150 right now. Okay. Or I'll pay them a close walk. And I was in Medway. Never had a problem. I never had a case in that one. I never read the
No, I'm invisible.
regular community that will get decided on the paper. And I see right now, I went to the Oak House, which is 4 miles away from my home, and they take it home there. Never said to take it home. You see what's going on? I know I lost the bill going on it, and we're going to be losing the middle of the going on it. I understand that. But I'm concerned about is the way these 2 bills that I bought tied up the same way as what's going on right here, right now. The valuation is being wrong. Being wrong substantially. And like the gentleman from Jay, Representative from Jay, stated 2 minutes ago, they used to pay, he's going on and going on anywhere between 75 and 85% of tax. Today, they don't pay, going on it, there's no birds of bankruptcy. He's going on it, and lost that far away. Here we are sitting this morning down here, to share the house with people, and leave the house. You gotta have a home. When you go home at night, you go home to a home. That's what people have. Home. What's the problem with the home? The home has changed these communities. The way of life has changed. Now we see people going to food banks. Now you see all kinds of different things we've never seen before. We've never experienced. And what it is to go hometown people. You see a hometown I'm talking about. Very resistant as long as we live the way we live because of these hometowns. We like to grow up and raise our children in the town that we grew up in. That's what these towns have done. Now here we are, and on the verge of allowing them to do that. Because the way I feel about this whole thing is about people. That's why I sit in this body here. I care about people. And I know people aren't supposed to be important in some instances, but I'll tell you what. You live in these areas, or kind of live, maybe go to another area, see what's going on out there, it's poverty. And there's no place for these people to go. We have not done a good job in the state of finding out a nation on a national, on a statewide basis. All of those that now, and this is the thing. Bill Holland about it, I'm going to keep on talking. Should we do something about it? Like I said, no, it's not a shame on that. Shame on that. That wasn't about what I do. That's just here, working out for this, and that. We're looking out for this, and going to hold it there. And by doing something in this line, by protecting the difficult moment, rising with these things, for helping a few regions of this thing. Then I take the time to do this. I think we, as a body, we ought to be sitting down, seeing what we can do out in these areas. So it's provide jobs. Jobs that are all things for our community. And I'll tell you what, I'm doing a very good job outside the state. A great job. I'll tell you what, if you want to solve problems like this right here, the way to do it is have to work by your economy. We haven't done that. We've gone, we love the nation of town, we know what they are. That's my situation.
The chair recognizes Representative Brooks and Representative Daughtry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I rise to answer a question that the prior asked. I just wanted to highlight that this is a matter that's very near and dear to the Education Committee. We saw quite a few bills dealing with taxation evaluation. In fact, there was a bill that a subcommittee of our committee worked with the taxation committee, which dealt exactly with this. And it recognized that we don't know what's going to happen in any town when a foreign person has having a sudden and severe change in your municipal valuation can happen to any of us anywhere in Maine. The bill was actually passed from emergency matter in gross those chambers and is on its way to the chief executive. And some of us have been through some concerns about tacking this on to the budget. So I want to highlight that we all understand this. We all feel for these communities, and that is why we did put a estimate in there applying to potentially change the factors for the current behaviors and evaluation.
Chair recognizes Representative Daughtry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, rural Maine, as you know, is starting in a small area that I live in about a 20-mile radius. Solar manufacturing, the largest hungry pressure maker in the world. They hungry pressures and us close up. Caucasian Real, the absolute largest wire rope real producer in the world, close to doors. Redmondsville, big gun stops for Remington Irons, Savage. They've gone, they've disappeared. And now the paper mills are struggling. These paper mills, the impact in a rural community is huge. It's astounding. The trucking, the lumbering, the gas stations, the stores, they all rely on this. I talked with one of the managers in Madison about an hour ago, and they're looking again at downtown. So when these bills, when they get reevaluated, in Madison Paper's case, they know what the value was. It's not some hoax, because they were sold a couple of years ago, so they know very well what the value is. They're not asking for a handout. They're asking for a fair evaluation. However, the impact on local communities, part of it because of the way the reevaluation is done, it's devastating. It hurts the school system. It hurts the police departments. I think Representative Farrell commented about the steps in Madison has gone from simply to continue to function as a community. So I would ask that you support the case proposal. It truly is critical to the survival of rural Maine. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Daughtry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to clarify there was some confusion as far as the text from this bill. This bill is, or this amendment, I should say, is based on work the Taxation Committee did, and it's a bill that remains, or the concept is a bill that remains in the pipeline. At this point in time, there was a task force from Education that came forward, made some recommendations, and those recommendations are included in this amendment. I do understand there's some concern as far as the distribution as far as it's related to education funding and other sorts of state assistance. I will say that this budget includes quite an increase to general purpose aid. So at this time, if we take the actual evaluations of these communities, the real evaluation, it seems like an appropriate time to include those, and as the money is redistributed anyway. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Roll call is in order. Any questions in the House? Amendment C, indefinitely postponed. The House will take the question. All those in favor of indefinite postponement, vote yea. Those opposed, vote no. The House will take the question. Chair votes on your arm to secure the chamber. G's.
Sorry, I was trying yeah. So it's written that
Take all that G's.
yeah. Some of us were, one of the girls was who are you talking to? And say what? I'll just keep going once in a while. Alright, sounds good. Thanks.
Call out voting. Here are the vote for the motion from announcement. 93 and voted affirmative, 56 negative. The motion prevails. It is now the vote of the House that committee amendment A, as amended by House Amendment A and B, there to be adopted. Vote to reject the suspension of the rules. The purpose of beginning the bill second reading this time. Hearing none, second reading bill entitled